Hi guys, and welcome to Stephen O's TV. Today we are going to teach you how to make the legendary papa roti, or Mexican bun, or roti boy. These are a lovely soft light bun filled with butter. They've got a crusty covering on the top which has an essence of coffee. You can get them out in the shops, but if you can make them at home yourself, they taste absolutely delicious. If you can't make them at home, get out and try one. Papa roti boys, Mexican buns, absolutely delicious. I'll just show you inside one of these buns. Here's one that I've cut open. You can see in the centre here, you've got butter that oozes out the centre and a light and crispy sweet bun covered with a little coffee essence. So guys, here are the ingredients you'll need for the papa roti boy buns. We've got 500 grams of flour, plain flour. We've got 270 millilitres of milk, and I've just warmed that slightly to help the dough rise when we're proving it. We've got 1 egg, a teaspoon of salt, 2 teaspoons of yeast. We've got 75 grams of brown sugar. Now you could use plain sugar, or you could even use caster sugar for this. It doesn't matter once it's mixed up. We use brown sugar or raw sugar, and we've got 60 grams of butter as well. And that's all going to be mixed together here in our mixer. You can do this by hand, but I can tell you we've got a mixer and we're going to use it, so it makes life a lot easier. So first of all, guys, we're going to pop our flour into our bread mixer. This is the 500 grams of plain flour into the mixer. We can add our 75 grams of brown sugar and our salt. It's a teaspoon of salt. And then we're going to pop the hook down into the flour. Turn that on the low mix. Just ready to blend those ingredients in together. Okay, we add in the yeast after the salt and sugar has been in there. Just mix that in. So we've got a mixture there now of yeast, sugar, salt and flour. And now we're going to add the wet ingredients, the egg and the milk, and mix that up into a dough. So I've warmed my milk up, not to boiling, but to quite a warm temperature to allow the yeast to activate and allow the dough to rise. So that is 270 millilitres of milk and 1 egg lightly beaten. I'm putting all the wet mixture in. I'm fairly confident of the levels, but sometimes you might want to hold a little bit back. The dough wants to be a fairly wet dough, not wet so that you can't handle it, but not a dry, tacky dough. You're going to be rolling these things out. You need to be able to handle them with lightly floured hands, but you want a fairly wet dough. So we're going to let that mix on a little bit faster. Mix that up into a dough. I'm going to leave that on for 8 minutes and we'll come back. Okay, so we've had that mixing for over 8 minutes now, and that dough is dry enough that you can touch it, but still quite a wet and elastic dough. We're just going to pop the butter in now, which will make it a little wetter still, and knead that again for another 5 minutes. So pop that in, pop our mixer back into place and start turning the butter into the dough. Take another 5 minutes, make a nice buttery dough. We come back after that's mixed in. So if you can see there, the butter is mixing into the dough. So it takes at least 5 minutes, but be patient. Sometimes you think it's not going to all bind together, but it will do. Just let the mixer do its work. Lucky you're not doing it by hand. There you go, the butter's starting to pull into the dough now. Sped up the mixing cook a little bit, and the dough is going to get nice and buttery. Okay, so that's our mix done. I'm just going to pull that off the hook. Now you can see the dough, quite wet and buttery, but it's perfect. We're going to take that out now and put it onto the work surface and prepare it. Okay, there's our dough. Pop that on the table. Now we're going to divide this up, and we're going to let it prove in pieces. So we're going to divide this up into 16 balls. We can cut that in half once. Okay, and this is the last one. Just cut that into two. So guys, we just get our ball of dough and we just push down with our hands and roll these into not too long, little bun shape. Pop them onto our tray. So we've got a fairly smooth bun to start with. And we'll leave those for 10 minutes now, and we'll come back and finish them off. So first of all, we just take our little roti ball and we just flatten it down. We'll take a knob of butter, pop it underneath, and we're just going to fold that in. We want to seal that, just pinch that closed, so that but this is going to give us that lovely creamy buttery thing that's synonymous with the roti balls, and we're just going to pop that one down on the baking tray. Here we go. We'll take another one, pop it onto our wooden board just to keep the dough from going too cold. We'll just flatten that down, turn it over, take a knob of butter, fold it round the roti around the butter, pinch it closed, and pop it on to our baking tray. Let's just do 1/3 one, then I'll get on and do it. So we flatten that down, turn it over, take a knob of butter, fairly large pieces of butter these guys, pop it into the roti, squeeze it closed, make sure it's tight, we don't want that to run out while it's baking, and pop that onto our baking tray. Okay, so when you've done all 16 of those, we're going to leave those in a warm environment to rise for about 45 minutes. So guys, once we've done our 16, I'm going to take 8 of these and I'm going to freeze them as they are on the tray, and when they've gone hard I'll pop them into a sealed Ziploc bag, and then we can defrost them another day, let them rise, coat them with the frosting and bake them. You don't want 16 of them today, and that's a great way of making up a big batch. So without further ado, we'll get ready to make the frosting. Okay guys, now we're going to make the frosting for the paparottis. This is a coffee-based frosting. So we've got ourselves a couple of tablespoons of just an instant coffee. You can use a liquid coffee from the supermarkets, a couple of tablespoons, or you can lessen or increase it depending on your taste. We have 160 grams of icing sugar. We have 200 grams of softened butter, 200 grams of all-purpose flour, or self-raising flour, and 3 eggs, which we're just going to lightly beat. And we're going to mix this up. You come over here and have a look at the mixer. So we've taken the dough hook off, and we've put the paddle, the K-beater they call it for the Kenwood, and we're just going to use that to beat the ingredients together. Okay, so first of all, the 160 grams goes into our bowl of icing sugar and our butter, which is not too hard. We're going to mix that together for 5 minutes at a medium speed, just blending it together until it's soft and smooth. Okay, now the icing sugar is mixed in, it's fairly light and fluffy. We're just going to start to add gradually the lightly beaten eggs into the mixture. Won't put it all in at once, we'll add it in maybe 2 or 3 stages. Okay guys, if you end up like I've got here, where the mixture, I've added my eggs a little bit too quickly and the mixture's breaking up a little bit, you can actually get around that by starting to add a little bit of the flour now into the mix, and it'll make the mixture a little thicker and bind those eggs into the wet mixture. So just 2 or 3 teaspoons of flour, put the speed up on the mixer and wait for it to combine. Okay, now I'm going to start adding the flour in to make our icing or our piping for the top of the rotis. Gradually add it into the mix. We're going to use all 200 grams or so. I'll watch the mix as I add it. I want a fairly thick icing so I can pipe it onto the top of the buns. Gradually add the flour in. So I've scraped down the side. Got a little bit on my fingers. That tastes absolutely delicious. That's just like a coffee cream ice cream. Add the last little bits of the 200 grams of flour. And when that's finished mixing, we've got a nice smooth icing. We'll pop that aside and wait for our rotis to be ready to pipe onto the top. So here we are guys, we've mixed that up. It's a lovely, thick, creamy... So here we are guys, we've mixed that up. It's a lovely, thick, creamy icing topping. And we're going to leave that in the fridge. I'm actually going to pop it into our piping bag. I've got a piping bag here. Let me just get the camera right. I've got a piping bag here with a nozzle about 3 millimeters across, and we're going to use that to pipe onto the roti tops. Now if you haven't got a piping bag, you can just use a teaspoon and just spread it onto the top of the roti, but we have one, so we're going to use it. So we've got our icing bag. We just roll back the top there so that we can get the mixture in. And as I said to you before, we're only going to use half of this mixture. I've made the full amount for all 16 rotis, but I'm going to use just half the mixture because I'm going to pop the other away. We're probably going to make the other rotis in the next day or so we can use this mixture straight from the fridge. So we'll pop the roti topping into the icing bag. I want a fair amount of this because we're going to be covering 8 rotis. Let's just squeeze that down. There you go, it's coming out the bottom there. I'm going to get too mucky. There we go, it's coming out. We're going to use that we're just going to pop it in the fridge to cool down. We're going to use that to cover the tops of our roti. Okay guys, here's our pepperotis already. They've risen a little bit. They've been in a warm place for 45 minutes. Here's the leftover piping which we're going to use for the other ones that are in the freezer in a day or so. And here's the piping I'm going to use. Okay guys, we're going to take the piping bag and we're just going to put the icing on the top of the roti in a circular manner like this. Now this is the first one of these I've done for a long time, so forgive me if they're a bit slower than you've seen them do in the shops. We're just going to put a decent amount of coffee icing over the top of this. Okay, and one more, just for the video. I say, if you haven't got a piping bag, just spoon it onto the top with a teaspoon. It'll have pretty much the same effect. Just putting this one a little thicker. Okay, the rotis are ready. The oven's up to 200 degrees Celsius. We're going to pop them in for 12 to 15 minutes or until they are brown. Let's pop the rotis in there. Close the door. And we'll be back to see in about 15 minutes. Okay guys, they've been in there over 10 minutes now, and if you have a look, they've risen beautifully. Just going to take those coffee rotis out, coffee buns, pop them on the stove top and let them cool off. They smell delicious. Look at those guys, perfect. Just like you'd get in the shop. I'm going to make myself a nice cappuccino, and we're going to sit and have ourselves a lovely hot Papa Roti boy. There you go guys, there is my homemade roti boy. Absolutely delicious. Just cut that one open, the butter's melted through the centre, nice crisp top, beautiful smell. Got to have a little try actually, and then I'm going to make a nice coffee. Delicious. Homemade coffee buns, roti boys, Papa Rotis, whatever you like to call them.